I am Antonia Apolinario Wilcoxon. I'm an immigrant to this country. I've lived in Minnesota for over 40 years now. I come from Brazil. I first arrived here in Minnesota to live on a farm as an exchange student with the American Field Service. And 5 years later, I returned, married someone I had met. And I have two sons, and I have worked primarily in social services, health, and human services. I'm not a social worker by training, but I tell people I can talk like a clinician. I really enjoy being among people in community, and I think I inherited that. My mom was a very gregarious person, so I grew up in a neighborhood that was low income, but a real community. A lot of support for all of us as children growing up. My mom was a young widow. I was 8 years old when my father passed on. My youngest sister was 18 months old, so that has been part of my experience, seeing someone who did not allow poverty to determine our future and our ambitions. And my coming to the U.S. as an exchange student was really an anomaly. No one in my neighborhood would dream to go overseas. And when I received the scholarship, that was life-changing, not only for me, but for my family and my community. I have always lived in Minnesota. I really enjoy living here. The winters are harsh, but you learn how to love the snow and navigate the ice. I have been very blessed. I think that I've had opportunities to learn, opportunities to meet people and experiences. And I like to talk about myself as a lifelong learner. I'm always in an engagement of learning about something. I completed my graduate degree, but my learning is really just expanded now into newer fields. ToPS has been an old friend. When I first started working for the state of Minnesota, and at the time I was still going to school, taking my graduate courses, I was studying critical pedagogy, which has a focus about empowerment of voices that are usually marginalized. It's part of critical studies that really interrogates why are there injustice, why do we have divisions, and how can we address them in a manner that brings people usually on the margins to the center. And that work was really the foundation for how I developed my work with the state. I was hired initially to manage a national grant, and then 3 years later, when I was promoted to work in another initiative, which was about disparities reduction, trying to understand why are some populations in the state of Minnesota not benefiting to the same level to access to social services, the quality of care they receive, and the fact that for many programs they're being left behind. And the way that I felt we could find answers was asking those communities who were experiencing those disadvantages. It was a proposal to a very large state agency that was not accustomed to sitting down with the communities we served, and they were, for the most part, invisible. And for me, it was not only my lived experience that informed me. I grew up poor, so I knew that people in my neighborhood had voice. And at the same time, my own curiosity about poverty in the state of Minnesota. This is a very wealthy state. It's progressive. We have a lot of liberals around. So I spent the last 15 years at the Department of Human Services, both studying, trying to bring voices of community into the agency, and impacting policy change. So it was really, for me, as an immigrant, a practice in democracy. When I started working in community, I found ToPS to be an incredibly helpful tool to help me learn how to listen intently, learn how to be in community without interfering, but being part of that community to listen and then bring the voice unchanged into the bureaucracy. And the tools that ToPS teaches you are valuable for that. So I spent years really bringing the voice initially and then to impact change. So the agency has an equity policy that is a reflection of community voice. The agency has a legislatively mandated community group that advises the Commission of Human Services about disparities reduction. So it's from their viewpoint. And for me, it affirmed my belief, my passion, and my commitment that if I'm working in areas in which people are disenfranchised, they are marginalized, it is my responsibility to alleviate that. ToPS provides me the tools on how to do that. How do you engage in a conversation in which you're respecting the other as a human being? How do they answer questions that touch their hearts, their minds, their guts, and their whole being? What are ways that we can engage in conversation that would be otherwise difficult, but framing questions that are respectful, that are inclusive, and that really values the voice of the other? When I left, I decided to leave state employment. I took early retirement so that I could run this on my own. So I got tired of the 20 plus years of 9 to 5. Now I still continue to work in the equity field, which is the one that brings me much energy and passion, and the realization that there is so much work still to be done, but really from a position in which I am not being guided necessarily by the internal policy and procedures of the organization, but I'm coming in as an adjunct. I'm coming in as a resource that I can share what my experience was, what did I learn in community, what are some of the things that still live at this agency that were good practices and that they bear repeating or exploring to improve.